Oh, okay. Well, welcome everyone to our GTAC session today on remote onboarding and training. So we have a wonderful panel here today. So let me just start off introducing. We have Hera here from CAA. We have Emma Dix from Wealthsimple, Claire Santos from Sonnet, and Evelyn Wright from Air Miles. And this event is sponsored today from Lessonly, and we have Stephanie Martin coming in, joining us. So welcome, Stephanie. Welcome, ladies. We have welcome. So we have 1 hour to get through lots of questions that I know people have on their mind to either see what is the right way to do it or confirm what you've been doing. Is it correct? And feel free to come in the chat. This is not meant to be a one-way monologue. So chime in, and if you want to share any thoughts, absolutely. We're going to have a very relaxed approach. So I'll just ask a question to our panelists, and you guys can feel free to chime in where you want to. Okay, nothing is a mandatory. Some will chime in on more, some will do less, no problem. So let me just kick it off here with Claire. So, we're all obviously remote for more than a year now, but when we went remote, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. So let me just backtrack a bit here. No problem. Let's start off with you, Hera. It's okay. See, go with the flow. Hera, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, hi everybody. So I work at CAA Club Group. I lead the learning and development team, a team of wonderful learning professionals at CAA, and we're responsible for all of the technical training. So anything that relates to whether it's retail or insurance or a travel agency, our team supports it. And a little bit about me: I've been in the learning industry for it's going to be about a couple of decades now, and yeah, that's it. I love it. I enjoy it. Here I am.
Thank you, and welcome. And Emma, how about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Emma, and I work on the enablement team at Wealthsimple. So we're responsible for training and quality assurance for our client experience team. So that includes our frontline associates as well as our financial advisors. So a bit about me: I've been working in training for many years. Prior to Wealthsimple, I worked in training for Airbnb in Dublin, where I'm originally from. So I'm really happy to be part of this panel, share some best practices, and learn from all of the other experts here as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And Evelyn?
Yes, hi everyone, Evelyn. I lead the team that both designs and facilitates training for our customer care ambassadors at Air Miles. I've been with the organization for about 7 years and held a variety of roles within the learning and development space, where I focus primarily on revamping our performance management programs, but also our high potential development programs. I've also spent some time working as an HR business partner, obviously supporting our business leaders and associates. I'm also very excited to be here to share my team's experience with going virtual and what that's been like. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from all the other panelists as well.
Wonderful, thank you, and welcome, Evelyn. And then Claire, where I started off with.
Thanks, Sangeeta. So I lead the training, comms, and knowledge team over at Sonnet for the the Digital Contact Center. I've been in L&D now for about roughly 15 years, but excited to be on this panel with both Evelyn, Emma, Hera, and Stephanie as well, and just share some of the experiences we've gone through going virtual, and from learning from everybody else. Like Emma said, what has everybody done that maybe we can incorporate into our current status right now?
Awesome. And then Stephanie from Lessonly. Welcome.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Martin. I am just here to be a fly on the wall and listen and support my fellow females here, but I'm from Lessonly. I'm one of the account executives there, and I've been in the software training space for about 3 years, but basically worked in L&D at Scotiabank for 5 years on leadership development training programs, and also supporting contact center training. So just here to learn from others and support the team here, and welcome everyone. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome. And Leslie's a fantastic sponsor of GTAC, and you'll see them at the big conference in November. So let's rock. Now, back to where I was a few minutes ago. Claire, let me just pretend this question came out of nowhere. So Claire, I have this question for you. What was the biggest challenge you faced, your team faced, when we went remote? And the second part of that, what is one success that you were able to achieve?
Great question. So the biggest challenge when we went remote, and I don't know if anybody else is in the same position, but we were actually at the very beginning of new hire onboarding when it happened. So there was a lot of chaos because nobody knew what to do. We had people who were panicking because nobody really understood COVID. And even from us, we were strictly, for onboarding at the very least, was strictly in-person instructor-led. So it was, how do we go from instructor-led to now we are completely virtual and there is no in-person contact. So it was a lot of really, try and learn what worked well, what didn't work well. I think the biggest challenge was we had a lot of group activities that involved a lot of discussion, a lot of activities meeting together. And at the time that we had just implemented Microsoft Teams. So there was really no ability to understand how that worked in a training environment. So we worked through that because we still did, after that first one, we actually had 3 more onboarding sessions almost consecutively throughout that. So it was a lot of, let's try this. Does it work? Great, we'll keep it. If it doesn't work, what can we learn from it to implement somewhere else? And then what is the one success we were able to achieve is from all of those learnings and those different onboarding sessions, I think we've come to the one point where we're pretty happy where our virtual training and onboarding is at, but also the learnings we did with that, it goes into the other on-the-job learning that we now all do virtually.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And the question, if you need to have a reminder for anyone, it's in the chat. Thank you. So did anyone else want to just chime in there? What was one challenge? Yeah, Hera.
I was going to say we were actually in a very similar boat, Claire. We were in the middle of a session that we just started. The length of the session was 2 weeks, but it was part of a broader program that's about 2.5 months. That's typically done in person. All the activities and all of the learning experiences are geared towards in person. So it was literally that moment of, I still remember that moment of, being told, no, everybody has to go home. And we thought, oh my goodness. So I think for us, for our group, our challenge was hardware technology, like the actual, having the learners, saying to them, wait, don't go yet. We have to give you a computer to go home with, right? So I think that was probably, for us, it was a similar thing of that transition, but it was, how do you now get people used to plugging in their own computers and that part of it that nobody ever sees because we all have such great IT areas who take care of it all, right?
Yeah.
So the tech was the big challenge.
Yeah, one of them, absolutely.
One of them, yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks, Hera. And Emma or Evelyn,
I can jump in. Yeah, I would similarly, it was really that shift in mindset, right? Not only from our facilitators who are very much used to doing things in person, but also from the learners, like, would we be successful in this new format? So I think, those first few sessions, like, it was a lot of like test and learn, but also like putting our best foot forward as well, just to really, make it so that people felt like this could work, but also be open and specifically asking for feedback from our participants and learners on like, how could we do this better going forward? So being open to that feedback. And then also, I think just there was an element of making sure my team was set up for success in terms of, using a new WebEx training platform. This is not where they're necessarily spent a lot of their time in the past. So just making sure that our folks were comfortable from, a facilitation perspective, and then, looking at, okay, if we're not, like, how can we get more skilled up in this area? The Association for Talent Development has some awesome courses on, virtual engagement and facilitation. And, we didn't shy away from spending time there to really ensure that we had the knowledge and the tools to make it successful. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. So Hera, I have a question starting with you. What did you find worked for your onboarding or training during the transition to remote, and what best practices can you share? And if you think about, say, platforms or length of time of onboarding training, or upskilling, what are some best practices you've learned?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of different perspectives there for me. So I would look at it from the perspective of the organization, or I should say the learning and development team. And then I'm going to look at it from the learner's perspective for just a minute. So if I start from the learning and development team, I think we had to figure out from a technology perspective what platforms to use for what audiences, because we knew we had different audiences. So we had to go through that rigor of will all of the platforms work for all of the audiences? So there was mention of Teams. Claire talked about Teams having just been introduced. There's Zoom, there's WebEx, there's Teams, there's Adobe Connect. There's so many different costs associated with each one of those things. So I think what one of the things that made us successful is having individuals on the team become very well versed in all of the technologies, so that we can actually identify very quickly which technology works for which audiences. Because we did have quite a few audiences within the organization that we had to support: internal partners, external partners, and so on. The other thing that I think from a learning perspective that actually worked for us was increasing the length of training by virtue of the activities that we had to switch a little bit. So the activities had to be learner-led, because at the end of the day, you're sitting in a room as a learner. I'm sitting in a room by myself, or wherever I am, I'm sitting there by myself, and my only connection is through the screen. So we wanted to provide, again, going back to the software, an area where you could have breakout rooms and you could have individuals working, collaborating, and being able to research stuff together. So we had to switch some of the content. We can't switch all of the content, because at the end of the day, yes, there are things that a facilitator has to kind of take a learner through by virtue of some of the time restrictions we have. But anyway, I go on, but so we had to accommodate that some more activities. We had to incorporate a lot more activities. The activities had to be more collaborative. The learning had to be learner-led, so that takes a little bit more time. The other thing too that we had to do was just to take wellness breaks. We're staring at some of our programs, like I said, are 2.5 months. You're staring at a screen for 2.5 months and you're sitting down all day. So, every hour on the hour, there has to be 5 minutes where somebody can just stand up and stretch, or, the things that we would have, done just walking to the bathroom, those types of things. So I think those are probably the key things, using whiteboards within whatever software that you choose, all of those things. From a participant perspective, the one thing that has made us successful is making sure that we teach people right off the bat, how do you log in? How do you use whatever platform? What are the ways that you can collaborate on that platform? And actually carving out, an hour, 2 hours, however long based on your audience, that time to take people through that. Because again, that's their safety net now, that this is how they're now connected to you. So I think those are some of the things that have worked for us. Again, echoing to what everybody else said. I'd love to hear if there's anything else that anyone wants.
Yeah, if I can ask, because I heard what you're saying. So the activities, when it was instructor led, you said instructor led?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
how long of a time were the instructors speaking before they brought in some activity?
So typically, I'll be very frank with you. There are in the instructor-led, the in-class version, we've had days where it's 3 hours. It's a lecture of 3 hours, and you can't lecture for 3 hours. Yeah, I mean, you could, but my goodness, you know what I mean? So for those portions, we had to break them up. We had to make them very digestible. Very some of it would be, you go and research, you two now come together and read this and present back. And so there was a lot of breaking up of that length of time into digestible pieces. 45 minutes seems to be, 45 minutes is what we try to do. Sometimes you can't, but again, that's our best, that's our guiding light kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from the others, length of time, if it's instructor led, and then what kinds of activities or platforms do you use? Whoever wants to jump.
I think probably similar to Hera, what she was saying, like I think 45 minutes to an hour is kind of like your sweet spot for a live session. I think anything over that, people start to get Zoom fatigue, they need to stretch their legs. And I think that happens very naturally in an office environment. Like you might get up, you might walk around, but when you're on Zoom, you're like kind of stuck to your seat. And I think what we found really effective is what we like to do is have a morning Zoom where it's like 10 minutes and it's like you have your morning coffee, you share some fun stories with each other, what you're watching on Netflix, then like break away for some self-directed learning in Lessonly, then come back on a Zoom, debrief, maybe do some other self-directed learning. And then we always wrap it up at the end of the day with like a Zoom, because I think it's important that they feel like they're part of a team when you're onboarding. Because in the office, it's like, oh, that excitement, like you're eating lunch together, you're getting to know each other. And it's so important that you feel part of a team and you feel engaged with the company culture and the team culture that we have at Wealthsimple. So we're really trying to like replicate that through onboarding. And I think those, organic coffee chats don't happen the same way. So it's structuring that into the day through these morning and evening sessions has worked really well for us.
That's wonderful. And are you comfortable saying how long your onboarding is?
So it depends, but for any agents that are going to be supporting our live channels, so phone and live chat, we've actually kind of similar to Hera, we've extended it to 4 weeks, just because that like organic on the job learning is not, you need to have it more structured when it's remote. So we found that we've had to extend it a bit as well, but 4 weeks is working really well for us right now.
And sorry, anyone can jump in. I had this one more thought. So is it a full day of training split up how you just said, Emma, or do you do it in shorter, like 3 hours and then do something else? Or is it onboarding or training a full day?
Yeah, so it's usually full days, but it's very varied. So they're
broken up.
Lessonly, live sessions, pairing with an experienced agent, shadowing, breaks, we really try and mix it up a lot.
Okay, good. Does anyone else want to chime in? Love to hear.
I can chime in on that too, but similar to Hera and Emma, I think the biggest thing was understanding that you can't be tied to your computer 9 to 5. And in most cases, anyway, in-person training, we try, and I think everybody is the same, we try to leave around 3:30, 4 o'clock because there's such an overload of information. But introducing more breaks was a big thing for us to get them up and going. And then the other thing was a focus on self-directed learning, but understanding they didn't have to be online to do that. So we would give them, an activity, and even if it was a group one, it was okay. We're going to have lunch around 12:30, but by the time we come back from lunch, and whether you have lunch first, you go to your activity, when you come back, it has to be completed. So there was a lot more onus on the actual learner to like, okay, this is on you to get done. Right, so that we weren't always online on screen, but and introducing to get involvement from the floor, because we were so used to, one of the big things we still can't quite do is like job shadowing, right? So we introduced a set group of people to come in and be sort of their peer mentors, that they could talk about the job, or they could just talk about what's the day-to-day like. And to Emma's point, to help incorporate those coffee chats that would have happened had they been in-house, but now that we're online, is introducing them to different people so that they still can get that feeling of team.
Right.
And in terms of platform too, was just how else do we engage them? So you really did have to incorporate many different methodologies of learning. So not just instructor-led, not just activity, but we introduced things like digital workbooks, so that it was an active part. We use different parts of we also use WebEx, where they actually have a training center where you can do things like annotate right on the screen to get people more engaged. And one of the big focuses that we tried to do was that for at least the first part of the day when you logged on, is to have your camera on so people can see you. Because in the very beginning, people didn't want to go on camera, right? And I think most people were very camera adverse, because it was like, oh, people are going to see everything I do. And so it was trying to get them uncomfortable with the idea of being on screen, because even if you're not doing it in your onboarding, when you get to your one-on-ones, they have to be on screen, right? And just to get that sort of personal connection. And that's probably one of the tougher parts of remote learning, is getting that personal connection, even though we're not all at the same place.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So my next question is actually for Evelyn. So what games, tools, strategies are you utilizing in training your remote teams?
Yes, so I think we all know that engagement is really critical because of the Zoom fatigue, and you're kind of fighting for people's attention. So we have put a really big focus on interaction and collaboration, in hopes to really keep that engagement high. So first, like in the classroom, we want to make our learning really application-based. So giving folks scenarios and case studies that they can work on in teams or pairs. And we use the breakout room functionality and in WebEx to have people practice that skill, or do the role play. And I think this gives people that opportunity to connect. I think we're all kind of craving that connection and learning from our peers. So that's worked very well for us. And in terms of interaction throughout the sessions, there's obviously a lot of tools, usually within whatever platform you're using. For example, for us, we're using WebEx Training Center for the most part, leveraging those polls, at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, still doing those knowledge checks and quizzes. The whiteboard, I think Claire might have already mentioned that, but it's a great tool to have people annotate or enter in their thoughts, or even dot voting. So that's worked really well. And those little emojis where people can let the facilitator know how they're doing, just, having that consistent interaction. I would say I wouldn't call it engagement, right? It's more of that interaction, to keep people kind of paying attention. And then where possible, we're also trying to do a little bit of gamification. So we've done things like scavenger hunts, where folks have to go to a different platform and look for information, and then kind of bring it back and debrief. And another great tool we've used in terms of gamification is Kahoot. I'm not sure if the ladies here have heard of it, but it's fun. It's a multiple choice, and it's cool because there's a winner, so you can tie prizes to it. If you're able to, obviously at Air Miles, we give folks Air Miles. And then to Hera's point, or Claire's point there with the energizers, it is, we can do all this stuff, but at the end of the day, people still need a mental break, doing something either just fun, or, getting up and moving their body. That is really important, as well as actually giving folks a real break. And then the last thing that I'll share, and then hopefully hear from other folks here, is we really have put a big focus on the design of our training materials, like what they actually look and feel like. The decks are our digital workbooks, just because, there is so much focus on that. People are looking at the screen, and we want that to be as visually interesting and stimulating as possible. Keeping minimal text, but just making that something that's energizing to look at has been another part of, this whole thing. There's lots of elements to consider, obviously, but that's just another piece that we have focused on as well in hopes to create more engagement.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So many insights. So your average training session, how long do you keep it with your
it really depends. I think typically we would try to, if it's something small, like we do lots of pilots, because obviously our customer care agents are like the first line of contact for a lot of things that we want to, test with our collectors. Something like that could be like 2-ish hours, but then, one of our main challenges that we were faced with this year was we had a 6-week program that was very technical and complex. It's for our most complex skill set. And we were tasked with making that program virtual, which, people didn't even think it was possible because it's previously like in person, very technical. And so with that, like those were longer programs, like similar, more like onboarding, like it does take a lot, but what we did instead was rethought, how do we deliver it? So actually went to a modular approach. So rather than do like 6 weeks back to back, obviously we're like, how can we split this up in almost levels? So you go and do week 1 for level 1, you learn, you do all the good stuff in the virtual classroom, and then you go out into the role and you practice it for a period of time, like ideally 3 months. And then you come back and do level 2. So, we do have some longer programs for some of our skills, more complex skill sets, but I would say to the points that folks have shared here, like, there is a kind of maxing out point that people have. So, something for something smaller, I would say, that 2 to 3 hour mark. And, that can even be pretty exhausting for folks. So, yeah.
Thank you. Awesome. Awesome.
Engaging.
Yeah. No, so many great nuggets. Anybody else want to chime in on what platforms? I know we heard WebEx here. Platform strategies, games that you're using, any tools?
I think for us, it's a lot of the similar, it's a similar approach, I should say. Kahoot is one of the ones, we've always used. For some reason, we always end up with very competitive audiences. I don't know what it is, but as soon as you put a Kahoot game up, it just always becomes, groups get divided and here we go. So even for in person, it's been quite the fun and engaging tool. And there's a lot of learning behind it, right? Like it allows us to do the knowledge checks without it being a test, without it being, having that stress around it. So, and it translated into the virtual environment quite easily and quite effectively. So yeah, I'd probably say we're very similar. Our approach has been very similar to what Evelyn and the group has done. We broke up, like even our training sessions, which are 2 months long, or some of the shorter ones, we've just broken everything up, and everything is, whether it's a visit from one of the leaders, a visit to Claire's point, you get, I visit speakers who come in from various departments, some job shadowing. So we always try to break it up. So, I say we take the modular approach, but it's more of a, because some of our modules themselves are about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. So it's that breakup of, let's do one type of activity for the next at most 45 minutes, and then, stretch break or whatever it is that we do. Yeah. But we similar strategies. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other suggestions on the games? Because I get asked that quite a bit. Other engagement tools around games.
I've used a couple of different tools aside from Kahoot too. There's one called Mentimeter. So aside from posting quizzes and polls, you can also do, some of those check-ins, and it does a word cloud, which works great, as a sort of an icebreaker in when you first start or after lunch. So it's another great alternative to Kahoot. And one of the things that we recently introduced this year too is we implemented a microlearning platform called Axonify. And so that actually has a gaming gamification portion to it, where it's a lot of reinforcement training that can go out on a daily basis for people to answer. And similar to Hera, we have a very competitive front line and people who love games. And it was one way to engage them and still get that on the job training, which has been one of the asks from our engagement surveys. And one of the cool things that we're actually doing this month is Exonify introduced a new soccer game. So we aligned it with the Euro Cup and are doing a Euro Cup tourney along with the game for that. So,
and we're just talking about this right now. I just had a question that's, sorry if whoever wants to answer. What are you doing also? We're talking about our frontline agents, but all the trainers and everybody else involved, are you finding different strategies to also keep them really engaged? Sorry, this just came out of the blue, popped in my little brain here. I had to ask. Anyone?
Yeah, definitely. It's I think everyone will feel the same, is that you have to change your strategy with your own direct reports now, right? Because you're not in the office. We used to have just off the chart meetings by somebody's desk and just, kind of the water cooler chat.
Yeah.
But definitely how you engage them is a little bit different. So it did mean a little bit more meetings. One of the ways our team engages is in the morning when everybody first logs in, it's, hey, good morning, Sangita, morning team. And then, we check in to say, okay, I'm going for lunch now, or I'm leaving now for the day, so that people know, like, okay, it's, we still have that sort of normalcy. But in terms of engagement for them, it also gave a good opportunity for them to take some other courses that they may not have been able to do at the office, because it now allowed time for them to, subscribe to that online course or take something that they've been wanting to take. And so, we had a lot more budget because we were at home. So it was like, well, let's use that education budget. What do you want to learn? Let's go look at that. What do you want to upskill? Definitely one of the first things we upskilled on was virtual training and virtual design. So it was a gain to get to them. So they've done a lot more learning this year than they have in previous years.
Okay, excellent. Okay, anyone else before I move forward?
I just had one other tool that I could share quickly. It's not something that we have used, but I experienced it as a participant in a learning session recently, and that was Google Jamboard. So it mimics sticky notes, and so everyone can share a thought, and it's a great way to gathers people's thoughts and stuff like that. So just wanted to share that in case it's something that folks want to check out.
So that Google Jamboard, can that be applied with any other platform?
Yeah, well, I think it's just a link. So we were in a WebEx, but the facilitator used Google Jamboards, and so it was just link based. So yeah, I think you can.
You have to have a Google account for that,
yeah.
But you can use it as part of a learning. But also, if you use MS Teams, part of their whiteboard now, they expanded their selection on Post-it notes. So you could do colors and kind of arrange them in different ways too. Jamboard is still a little bit better, but if you can't get that Google account, MS Teams has something like it too.
Nice.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And thanks, Mike. Thank you. So I have a question for Emma now. And then after Emma, feel free to chime in. How do you scale onboarding and/or training?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely top of mind for us because we've grown so much over the last year. So I wouldn't say we've perfected it yet, but it can definitely share kind of some of our experiences. So, we were very lucky to have used Lessonly prior to moving to a remote world, which was key for us in scaling our training and onboarding. I mean, if we didn't have an LMS like Lessonly, we definitely would not have been able to double our team in the space of a few months. I think it's also allowed us to, kind of going back to the previous point, I think it allows us to be very strategic on how we use our live sessions with our trainers. So, we're kind of moving a little more towards using our live sessions for, knowledge sharing, best practices, discussion, and more like practical sessions. And then using Lessonly kind of like for the bulk of our training, essentially. We've also, in terms of like post-onboarding training, We've also built certifications in Lessonly. So all trainees will pursue certification in their domain post-onboarding, which has been essential in terms of scaling training as well. I mean, we may complement it with some live sessions, but most of the learning post-onboarding continues in Lessonly. And I think it's also, you know, really important that you understand the trainee's journey post-onboarding. So through post-training surveys, you start to build a picture of what they're learning and maybe what their blockers are, you know, week 4, week 8, week 12 in their journey. And we've actually started to proactively build micro learnings in Lessonly to address that. So every week post-onboarding, they'll get these like little bite-sized training sessions to upskill, which we're currently developing them. So I'm sure they'll be hopefully effective as well. And I think lastly, in terms of scaling, you have to have support from your wider team. I really don't think, you know, most of the learning happens post-onboarding when they're actually applying their knowledge and doing, you know, answering calls, responding to emails. So you really need to get buy-in from your stakeholders and support from your wider team. So I think it's really clear that it's really important that you create a clear training plan for each of your cohorts, and it outlines the responsibility of each stakeholder. So whether that's team leads, managers, senior agents, so that, you know, it's really obvious what support is needed post onboarding and the role that these people will play in ongoing learning. So like we've found it very effective to like use senior agents to train our junior agents through shadowing sessions. You know, they'll share their screen, they'll take phone calls. I honestly think if you don't have support from your wider team, you can't scale your training. And to get that buy-in, you do have to have like very clear training plans that outline what the outcome will be from your training. So that's some of the what we found to be effective anyway in scaling onboarding and training. But yeah, I think, and knowledge management, we're currently exploring what that looks like. Right now our information is everywhere. We're undergoing a project to use some sort of knowledge management tool. I think that's kind of the last piece for us, so that agents can go back and find that information much easier post-training as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, would love to hear anyone else's thoughts.
And that's amazing because I know Wealth Simple is growing so much. I see on my Twitter and Instagram, like things coming up all.
Yes,
like,
we're hiring. Apply.
Pardon?
We're hiring. So
yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, anybody else want to share how they scale either onboarding or even separate training? Yes, no? Okay, no problem.
I can share quickly from
Okay.
more of the training perspective, but we've really challenged ourselves to think about, you know, what can we turn into an e-learning or a micro learning, just because we are such a small team, and obviously, you know, it takes a lot of time and resources to facilitate everything live. So really looking at what can we turn into e-learning that we can almost create a library where leaders could go, like if there's a gap in this particular area, the leader goes and assigns their associate that little micro learning or e-learning. And so just really kind of having that more sustainable and scalable approach in mind, just because, you know, we're dealing with such large amounts of folks, right? Usually call centers are quite large and a small training team. So what can we do to make it so, you know, people have what they have what they need and when they need it, that just in time approach. So that's kind of from the training perspective, what we've been trying to do to make things more scalable.
Wonderful. So Claire, I know you're managing the chat right now. Any questions?
There does seem to be a lot of great comments from people,
Yeah.
but no questions so far.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Oh, there's one from Mike. How do you evaluate the effectiveness of remote training? Thanks, Mike.
Ooh.
Who'd want to challenge?
I can take a stab at it of what we're trying to do at CAA. So you know, evaluation is one of those things. Evaluation effectiveness is one of those things that, you know, for me personally has eluded me for such a long time. And it's something that I've always wanted to formalize and kind of take a very much closer look at. We all know, you know, you have your exams that you do at the end of the session, you know, and you do all the analysis around them. What we've started doing is looking at performance ratings once the learner reaches the floor. So this is where, you know, I think it was Emma who said the partnership between, you know, the various teams within the organization. So we have our post-training onboarding has, you know, a 3-week, very systemized approach to how individuals start actually taking calls on their own. You know, there's a process that we've put in place that each learner has to go through, or each associate has to go through before they can actually take a call on their own. So what we're starting to look at, and this is where I would welcome, you know, any kind of insight then that you all have. We've started looking at the performance, you know, because there's also quality standards that every one of us have to reach. So we've started analyzing what those quality standards are, the assessment, the results, and actually looking at it in, you know, in almost like 6-week chunks to see, you know, once we see that first assessment, what's the feedback, tie that then back to the training to see, are we seeing, you know, and the assessments, because most of our training programs have assessments along the way. So being able to tie the actual performance, tying that back to training. When things are, you know, well, then, you know, I mean, part of it I'd like to you know, to be able to say that it reflects training. When we see some of the lesser percentages or the lesser results, what we're trying to do is tie that back to certain portions in training, how we cover it. And, you know, that way we're also improving our program. So it's not just training effectiveness, being able to say, you know, this portion of the training is incredible, this portion of the training, not so much. We're also trying to see, you know, what we need to change on our end. So improve our programs at the same time. I think we're at the infancy of evaluation. You know, for us specifically, but that's what we're doing right now, is looking at actual performance results once individuals hit the floor, whether it's through that transition period and then comparing it to the actual results thereafter at that 6-month mark. So in 1 year.
Good. Yeah. Anybody else want to chime in?
Can I mention something?
Yes,
And
please.
Sangeeta, do you mind?
No, please.
This is just more specific in general. We hear this often. And I think some of the ladies chimed in about or shared about the different perspectives. I think it's easy to think about it from a learning perspective because we're in it from a day-to-day basis as a training manager, et cetera. And then also, you know, as you work to support your business lines, often what they care about when we speak to them is the results and in terms of impacting their business line goals. So those business line goals can be anywhere from NPS scores to cross-sell ratios to sales. And I think that's what you were touching upon here about trying to kind of bring that, the training, all the different things that you guys have worked on, and then tying that together. And there was a myriad of ways to think about it, but, you know, it's through measuring impact through, you know, how you track those KPIs, whether it be in things like Salesforce, your CRM, et cetera, and then seeing, you know, anecdotally, you can say that the training went very well, right? But, you know, the hard part is measuring the impact after and understanding if there was actual causation as a result of that training on an upsell of that product or an uptick in that score. And that's the biggest gap that we're hearing quite often that folks can't make the connection on. And so I think going back to Emma's point is really getting the support from the post-sales, the post-training component on, you know, what success looks like and what success is, because success is not whether or not they got 80% on an assessment. It's certainly a part of it that's going to directionally tell you that. Success is not completion rates. success is, did it actually move the dial on those business line goals? And so it's going hand in hand and working closely with your partners on that. So that way you're all defining the same thing. What tools and everything you use, obviously that can be debated. But I think it's going deeper there. And it sounds like, Kara, you're starting to kind of like, kind of chip away at it, which is cool. And I know that's a common challenge that we hear often. You're not alone on that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie.
I want to add to that, to what Stephanie mentioned too. And I think it's really important even from a learning perspective, because, we all understand L&D inside and out, but to connect those points is really understanding what are those organizational objectives and tying your learning objectives into that. And I think one of the good points that you made, Hera, is working with the quality team, because it's what we do too, because quality and learning go hand in hand, right? You can't really have one with the other, because training trains to how quality scores to how training trains. So you really need both of them, but it's really understanding those, what are the goals for this year? Short term and then long term, and then ensuring that, okay, do my learning objectives align with what we're trying to do? Aside from getting that product knowledge, getting that system knowledge down, is how do we align those to that? And even in some of the other smaller objectives is, to Stephanie's point, what does that success look like? So we train them on X product. How do we know it's successful? What do they see as a good return on investment for this training? Because for the operational side of the business, it's always about what are those numbers? And I know from a training point of view, for us, it's always, that's a tough one for us, because we're aligned to more initiatives and to align to getting them there, but they always want to see harder numbers, right? And even what we do is a smaller portion of what those KPIs are, because it aligns with them, but it's not the direct cause of them. Does that make sense? So it's hard, because I get the same question, is like, okay, show me some definite numbers to show that training it works well. And it's like, well, how can I say that it does? Because for our team, it's very project-based. Like, we're a support team. We provide support to those services. We don't really produce anything. So it's hard to justify why we do X training for X amount of time to show those numbers, but it's trying to align those objectives of the business or that department to ensure that we're aware of what that success looks like and tracking it those ways. Excellent.
Great. Good discussion. And great question from Mike. Awesome. So we are now 2:47. Oh, we had a question here. Okay, how do you make sure the trainers are engaged? Well, I want to continue on. I just lost mine here.
Yeah, I'll read it for you. How do you make sure the trainees are engaged and paying attention during the live session, especially for a big group? Who wants to take that on?
Good question.
Oh boy.
Do you do pulse checks throughout and ask for, chat participation? Like, what are you doing throughout?
Yeah, pulse checks are a good one. I'll jump in with that. We do a lot of that. And one of the other things, again, is trying to have that video on as much as possible, because then you can truly see, because again, we're not in person where you can just walk around and like, oh, what's so-and-so doing with their computer? Oh, okay, they're not where we are, or they are where we are. Okay, great. So it's having those pulse checks, and again, those emojis, and understanding that, hey, Hera, I'm going to call at you at any time, so hope you're prepared, because I'm going to call you. So it's kind of getting things that way and trying to get them more engaged. And again, in that interaction with their people, even if it's in breakout rooms, or, the one-on-ones, and trying to get that way. And even from a breakout room perspective, is you're jumping in and out of the break rooms, seeing how everybody's doing.
And does anyone do this? Like, ask a question, say, okay, everybody put in the chat, and then you read the chats as they come in and call out the names. Oh, Hera said this, Claire said that. So absolutely. Pop that throughout, because I know otherwise, what other way? Okay, wonderful. Thank you for your question. So as we wrap up, I'll be asking each person to share final takeaways, because it's such a big subject, and so many different perspectives, and perspectives have value. And so that's why I just did a session a couple of weeks ago, same topic, but it's endless, because it is a current challenge. So before we do final takeaways, I do want to bring on Stephanie Martin from Lessonly to share a little bit about Lessonly, and then I'm going to come back for the final takeaways with the ladies. So, Stephanie?
Hi, thank you, Sangeeta. Well, first, thank you to all the ladies who have decided to or came on during their Wednesday afternoon to help perspectives. Truly, this has been helpful in terms of just learning from all of you. And that's kind of why I was so giddy to get the feedback from Sangeeta about bringing other perspectives and just sharing all the different sides of what training looks like across these different companies. In terms of Lessonly, for those of you who haven't heard of us, we are a modern learning platform that is lightweight, and we work primarily with customer-facing teams. So that's sales and both support. Sangeeta can certainly share my contact at some point if you're interested in learning more. But for me, this is also just a learning opportunity to learn from all of you, particularly through the ladies on this panel, and then also from some of the questions that are coming through chat, because that makes me better and that makes our team better in terms of the feedback that you shared. So thank you so much for sharing, ladies. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Stephanie, I wanted you to be on too, to speak, because you're really insightful and you come from a place of knowledge because you're from this space, so you get it. So, and you understand. Yeah. So that's why I thought you should be on the full panel because your insights are valuable. I'm not just saying that. I never really want people to come in and chitty chat other than the main speakers.
Yeah.
But no, you're cool. You're good. You're good.
Thank you. I'm happy to chat separately if anyone wants to reach out. And my door or my email is always open on my Zoom door.
Yeah. And when I send out the link to the recording, I'll add your information in there for anyone who wants it. Okay. So let's just do a final wrap up, a little speed round of takeaways that you want our attendees to have. So I want to start with Hera.
So I think for me, it would be that we are forever evolving. We're in this world that we're in right now. Every day we learn something. Every day, something changes, a variable changes, something that we were depending on changes. And that's okay. We're not always going to have the answer, but I think if we always go into it with that mindset of helping the learner, at the end of the day, we want to make the learner successful. I think we can be that transparent about it. I think at the end we would get the needed result, but I think it's change. It's our constant is change right now. And while we could say that it always was, I don't think to this extent, no. So.
And that's beautiful what you said. The goal is to help the learner be successful.
Absolutely.
Because some old school learning development training, they're just like, well, I train.
Yeah. No.
Right. But no, that intention and that mindset, let the learner be successful. Awesome. Golden. Thank you. How about you, Emma?
Yeah, I think, just from listening to all the insights, it's clear that, remote onboarding and training can be a really great experience, both for the learner and the trainer and for the business. And I think, it's important to maybe design your training with the remote experience in mind versus trying to adapt your in-classroom training to a remote environment. So that would be probably my big takeaway.
Awesome. Yep. Create it. Because even when people go back, it's going to be still a hybrid model. And your new hires, even if they're going to be working on site, it's just easier to train them remotely yeah, absolutely. And then Claire or Evelyn?
You go ahead, Evelyn.
Okay. I love all the takeaways shared so far, by the way. I would say, try to create that space for people to connect and still learn from each other in the virtual environment, because that's something that you can easily miss. And it's what people are, what they used to have in the real classroom or the live classroom. And so I think doing that, as well as ensuring that it's, they're still able to apply their learning in, whether it be through a business case scenario or something that is really going to help them when they're back on the job. So getting that practice in, and there's tools at our fingertips to do this, like breakout rooms, etc. But still, even though we're in the virtual world, there's still the adult learning principles still apply, right? It's just how do we adapt to this virtual method of delivery.
Love that. Absolutely critical. Create that space for them to connect and be. Yeah, absolutely. And then Claire.
I don't think there's anything else I could add that Hera, Emma, or Evelyn haven't said. I think maybe the only other thing I would say is just that, be easy on yourselves. We're at L&D, we're going to make mistakes. And I think the one key point that we need to remember is there's a reason why we're in L&D, and we have to continuously learn. And it's always going to be a learning process for all of us, right? So we just got to be easy. Like, nothing's ever going to be perfect. It is what it is, but, experiment. Try this to see if it works with your audience. Try that if it doesn't. Okay, if it doesn't, great. We learn from it. But, you're never going to know unless you try and make those mistakes.
Exactly. And I think what Stephanie just wrote, give yourself grace. Because to be an awesome facilitator, trainer, leader of teams, you need to give yourself grace to be fully present also to deliver. And first, you got to pour into yourself before you can pour into everyone else. Mm-hmm. And all of you guys gave such beautiful takeaways. I could just carry on this discussion, just learning from each of you. And so before we wrap up, I first would say thank you. But if you go on, Mike, can you put your event in chat? On June 24th, Mike Aoki is facilitating a session, and it's posted on the GTAC website. And it's how to engage and retain your contact center team. And Mike will be facilitating that. So feel free to join on June 24th. And tickets for our big conference on November 4th are on sale. 100% of ticket sales are going to charity, to the Daily Bread Food Bank, or to Cure SPG 50 to help find a cure for children with rare diseases. And that's why sponsorship from companies is more important than ever. So thank you, Leslie. Very much appreciated, because then we're able to do the full give back. But today's session has just been wonderful. It just so energizes me, this topic. And each of you just shared in the way that needs to be shared in today's world. More important than ever is with that authentic self. And fully transparent. And I love what your each takeaways were golden. If you don't mind, can I ask all the speakers to send me what you said in email to me? Because I'm going to add it. I wasn't taking notes. Sorry, I was so focused on not messing up Zoom. So if you can send it to me, I'm going to add it in the little thing I sent back to all the attendees. So thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, Leslie, Hera, Emma, Evelyn, and Claire. And then thank you to everyone who chimed in and attended. This community, our tribe, we serve each other, learn from each other, and so grateful to meet all you wonderful people. So take care, and you'll be seeing a recording in a couple days.
That's good. Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Sangeeta.
Bye.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Mike. Bye-bye. You guys were amazing. Bye, Claire.
Bye, Sangeeta.
Bye.